Okay, you guys ready for another Advent message? Yeah. Thank you so much for hanging in there last week when we did not have church service. You know what's amazing about this community of people? We didn't have church last week and nobody blinked. Everybody was just like, oh yeah, okay. Cool, you posted a video? Great, see you next week. All right.
We had a wonderful sermon.
It was lovely. I went into the new building, hit record on my iPhone, and knocked it out. That was all right. So it just is really cool to see like the gathering isn't the be all end all for this community, and I really love that. I love that. But we're going through a series for Advent called Advent Conspiracy. It's got 4 weeks of Advent. Advent being the anticipated arrival of somebody important. The conspiracy is we're conspiring with the Holy Spirit to worship with our whole hearts this Christmas season and not let anything else crowd it out. And so the first week was Worship Fully, where we talked about how to enter the story of Christmas and how to make sure we're guarding our hearts to be able to connect with Jesus during that time. The second one was Spend Less, and that was the one that was on video last week. And the idea is this: we should just be cautious about what we do with our spending, because our spending actually tells a story, and we want to make sure that our spending tells the story of Christmas. And so not only do we look at our spending financially, but we look at our spending on our anxiety, on our worry, on our busyness, and we say no to some of those things so that we can say yes to a heart that's fully engaged with God. And today we're actually going to look at the other side of that coin. Last week was Spend Less. Today is Give More. Now that may seem contradictory. Okay, we just said spend less, and now you're saying give more, but they're actually two sides of the same coin when we're talking about engaging in worship of Jesus. I think I'm going to tell you stories of my two favorite presents I ever got. And I'm totally a gift guy. I like presents. And if I don't feel like I'm getting enough presents in my life, I will be really honest. I am flawed enough that I will go out and buy myself a treat if I just feel like I need a present. That's called retail therapy. I don't totally recommend it. At the same time, I have to say I'm an active participant from time to time in that behavior. My favorite presents I ever got, one year Rachel got me a pair of this really lovely lady in Amonic handmade these beautiful seal fur slippers with a beaver ruff that goes around them and a hand-beaded flower on each one of them. And I always wanted a pair of slippers like that. My dad had a pair of those when I was growing up, and I would always put them on. You know when you put on your parents' shoes and they're way too big and you just kind of slide around in them and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was like super personal and intimate in that way. And Rach knew that, and we had seen some in a shop, and I said, oh man, I always wanted those. I would love to get a pair of those someday. And she got those for me, and I wore the moose hide out of the bottom of them, and so I have to get them repaired at some point. But now they just sit on my dresser, and I just look at them and sometimes pet them. And I just love them. And the thing I loved about them was it was just like this, someone I loved was paying attention, was thinking about me and heard me and made something happen that I wanted in my heart. I mean, that was a beautiful thing. My other favorite present I've ever gotten is a guitar. I like to play guitar every now and again, and for my 40th birthday, I don't know, it seemed like 100 of my friends, some of you in this room, thank you so much again, all went in behind my back and got me this guitar that I had been talking about for 15 years, this Gretsch White Falcon that I just wanted, playing in bands for so long. This is the guitar I always wanted, but really couldn't ever afford it. And so I showed up at my birthday party, and it was really fun, and we were all having a good time, and they, my brother-in-law and stuff, they invited me to come up on the stage, we're going to play a song kind of thing. And I got up there, and they pulled out this guitar case, and I was looking at them like, what is going on? Because if somebody buys you a guitar, that's a big deal. And then they opened the lid, and my knees buckled. And I cry at the drop of the hat. You know that already. But I just like a tiny little baby. You could have put me in some swaddling clothes, and it was like that. And it was just this, it was such a beautiful expression of love. The guitar is great. I love the guitar. But more than the guitar itself, was this understanding that there was a community of people who loved me enough to be able to contribute to make something important happen for me. And that was astonishing to me. And I think that's one of the things about Christmas that's actually really cool is Christmas is a gift-giving season. And I think gift-giving is important to recognize because gift-giving has always been a part of the Christmas season. In case we think it's a modern invention made by Hasbro, it's not. In fact, it has a pre-Christian tradition with the worship of an old deity called Saturnalia. It was a pagan gift-giving holiday where it was really marked by role reversal, where the poor became rich and the rich became poor, and there was drunkenness and there was feasting. And then the Christians came along and they took that and they sort of subversively took some of that time frame and activity and made it for their own meaning. And it has a Christian tradition, of course, since the very beginning, where wise men, maybe when Jesus was potentially a toddler, seeing the star that had been put in the sky that they'd been looking for, gave their gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and traveled at extensive cost to themselves to worship before Jesus and put those gifts at his feet. Sometimes, like, do you guys listen to the Christmas music station in your car at all? Right? Like, I actually really don't like it, but sometimes it happens. And the other day, I found myself tuning to it anyway. It was like it was like the force was just moving my hand. And I tuned to it, and like there's a lot of weird old Christmas songs. You ever heard that song, Good King Wenceslas? Good King Wenceslas went to town on the feast of Stephen, right? Like you're sitting there and you're like singing along and you're like, I have no idea why I should know any of these words. This doesn't mean anything to me. There's a guy named Wenceslas. Hey, I'm going to put that in my bucket list for like if I have another kid, please, Lord, don't let me have another kid. But if I did, then Wenceslas is in the running. Wenceslas, there you go. Well, actually, so as actually a real person, and in his day, gifts were usually given to superiors, and Wenceslas actually famously goes out and reverses that oppressive practice of where the poor would actually be taken advantage of and be forced to give gifts to their superiors, and he goes out in the harsh winter and he gives his alms to the poor on the Feast of Stephen. And so that song is actually recounting a change in culture and in society and in history. St. Nicholas, right? Santa Claus, where we get this idea. St. Nicholas, a bishop in what's now modern-day Turkey, in Myra. He's actually comes from a very rich family. He rejects his life of wealth and lavishness, and instead he uses his good fortune to give inheritance and gold to those who are in need. And there are all sorts of cool legends. My favorite legend about St. Nicholas is one time there's these 3 daughters who their father doesn't have any money to feed them. I don't know what's happened to their mother. They're in a desperate situation. They're losing their house, and they're basically going to be sold into slavery if something doesn't happen. And the legend is that while they were darning their socks, they were hanging them over the mantle at the fire where they were living in order to keep them dry and to work on them or something. And Nicholas apparently like runs by like a little Christmas ninja, and he throws bags of gold through the open window, and they land in the socks. And in the morning they get up and they get their things out of the socks, and they don't have to be sold into slavery. That's such a beautiful legend. I actually hang stockings on my mantle. Right, it has all of our names. And right now, the kids get like candy and oranges and that kind of stuff. But like someday, if I ever make it as big as St. Nicholas, I'm running by like a Christmas ninja and dropping gold and stuff. Like that's going to be a fantastic thing. So Christmas has always had this gift-giving component to it. That's actually really beautiful. Our modern idea of gift giving at Christmas, where we just give gifts to everybody, right? Where you're like thinking to yourself, like, I got to remember my third cousin's name so I can get their gift to them at the appropriate time. That kind of idea of gift giving actually gained popularity through plays and dramas. The Night Before Christmas in 1823 and A Christmas Carol in 1849, those had a massive impact on our cultural understanding of gift giving at Christmas. And so those things happen. But I like gifts and I like gift giving, and I think that that's fantastic. But I think there's a problem actually with our gift giving sometimes. And I think that sometimes our gift giving can actually compete for our love for God and for our heart's affection. I think actually sometimes gift giving can derail and distract us from actual worship during Christmas time. I'm just going to use two examples of maybe sometimes where this comes into practice. I think the thing for me in my heart, the one that like gets in the way quickest and is most easily identified when I think about giving gifts is obligation. Have you ever given a gift out of obligation at Christmas? And you're there and you're at the store and you're thinking to yourself, what is the right amount gift card to give to this relative I haven't talked to in a decade? And you're wondering if your $25 gift card is going to send the right message. And really, it's like this weird tension. Maybe I'm just telling on myself and you guys never feel this way, but I'm a little bit of a jerk on the inside. And like I get in that spot where I'm like, I really don't actually want to be buying this gift right now because we don't actually talk. But I have this sense of obligation that says like, man, if I do not send my $25 Walmart gift card to my second cousin who I haven't seen in ages and ages and ages and literally have never spoken to them, then somehow they'll think that I don't love them. And it's like our plastic gift card with the magnetic stripes somehow says, I love you. And if we don't get it at Christmas, then somehow our love is like messed up. And it's like this weird, for me, it's this weird, twisted obligation and tension that I just don't like. And it wraps me up a little bit. And when I'm in that spot of what am I doing with my gift giving, I can tell you exactly what I'm not doing. And what I'm not doing is having a heart full of worship. I'm letting resentment creep in. I'm letting weird things. And so for me, that's a little bit of an issue. I think one of the other things about our gift giving that can sometimes crowd out our affection for Jesus during Christmas is entitlement. I have 5 kids. If you ever want to meet entitled people, you should just come talk to children. Right? They actually, like, if you take them down the aisle, at some point they will believe everything they've glanced at is absolutely deserved by them, and they would like it for Christmas at some point. They would love to have it. Sometimes in our entitlement, it can be something like, well, everybody seems to just be having a better Christmas than me. I think I actually just deserve a little bit of a better life. Hello? I see by your like, stop talking about this, Rich. Looks that you understand what I'm saying. So here's the thing. Our gift giving was always meant to be a celebration of relationship. That's what Christmas gift giving was for. To celebrate relationship, and it becomes a problem. It becomes strange and twisted when it becomes disconnected from relationship. That's why sending the gift card to the distant relative seems strange to me and seems kind of twisted to me. It's because it's absent of relationship. And my sending that gift card out isn't evil. Who doesn't want another $25 gift card to Walmart? That's great. But it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, especially at Christmas, and that's why it feels off. And sometimes with even our children, if our gift giving is meant to just like satisfy them so that we don't have to dive into the difficulty of training them to be content, then that gift giving actually is a shortcut away from relationship, and that's where it gets weird. Not to mention stepping on Legos in the middle of the night hurts so bad. But that's what happens when our giving is disconnected from its purpose, from its relationship. And I want to take us just to John 1 in his prologue, verses 1 through 18, to remember what it is to give more. And we look at the example that God's given us when he says, in the beginning, the Word already existed, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he existed in the beginning with God, And God created everything through him. And nothing was created except through him. And the Word gave life to everything that was created. And his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. God sent a man, John the Baptist, to tell about the light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light. He simply was a witness to tell about the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. And he came into the world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. And so the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. And John testified about him when he shouted to the crowds, "This is the one I was talking about when I said, 'Someone is coming after me who is far greater than I am, for he existed long before me.' And from his abundance, we have all received one gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart, and he has revealed God to us." The way that God gives more is he gives himself. The gift of God is his very presence. And I love that. I love that so much, actually. The world's full of problems, full of difficulties and situations that honestly I just don't understand. And they're complex, and I can't really navigate them on my own. And I don't have the ability to change the things that I want to see changed all the time. The people I love are still experiencing beauty and laughter and hurt and trouble. But honestly, this is where Christmas comes to lift me up. This is where the message of Jesus being born actually gives me hope. The world has always had problems, but God's answer to the world's problems has always been relationship. And on its face, honestly, it just seems a little ridiculous to me. Relationship is where we all get hurt. And yet God's ordained that relationship is where we get healing too. And it seems like, think about Christmas for just a second. It seems like such a strange solution to me. Here's a war against darkness and evil and destruction and death. And God's solution is to send a baby. Oh, hell's advancing? Great, let's send a baby. It's too tender to be effective, right? Fight fire with fire. If a baby's good, then an army of archangels should be better. Except for that's not the way it is. I like the way poet Cheryl Laurie actually reflected on this. She wrote, "We're tempted to think that this is out of character for you. A momentary fragility, showing your tender side. That once the Christmas carols are finished and the decorations, are put away, that you'll get back to power and might. But in your completeness, this one chance we get to see flesh and bone put onto the theory. This is you, fragile, impossibly vulnerable, and at the mercy of human response. God's continued response to every problem that you and I are facing, and every problem the world is facing, is relationship. And relationship through us. Could you and I really have had a relationship if Jesus had showed up as a 900-foot on fire flaming archangel with a sword that could split the earth in half? Probably not. So instead, what God does is he sends us relationship in the most common manner possible. A baby. A new human life. And what I love about Cheryl Laurie's reflection on this is to look at the possibility of hope in Christmas that comes actually in God working through us. I love the lines that she penned in here, that this is you, fragile, impossibly vulnerable, and at the mercy of human response. And I think of God at work in you and I, the Holy Spirit indwelling the life of every believer, and him sending us as a solution to the problems in the world, as well as he sends others to help address the ones in our lives too. Because I look at it and, all right, right now, let me just be really honest with you. Right now, there's enough problems in the people I love all around me that honestly, I feel like I'm just inadequate to show up and be a help. And if I feel that way, and I actually believe that, there's a sense of hopelessness that comes from it. But when I actually reflect on what is it that we are celebrating at Christmas, what I understand is this, is that in the vulnerability, in the fragile nature of it, in the relationship that is subject to other people's responses and reactions to me, this is exactly where God is at work. This is exactly what God has done. His answer to the problem of evil in the world was to send a person. The answer to the problems in the things around me and the people I love is to send me. Am I inadequate for that task? Yes, because I'm human, but I'm fragile and vulnerable and at the mercy of human response. And yet that's exactly where God wants me. That's exactly the story of Christmas, as God works through me to actually love the people around me. Can I fix all the problems? No. What can I do in the middle of it? How can I tell the story of Christmas in my life as a result of it? I can show up and I can love. I can show up and I can be patient. I can show up and I can offer the support I can. I can show up and I can trust the Holy Spirit. So, I don't know what you got going on this week. But if you have a difficult situation in the loved ones around you or in your personal life, here's what I can tell you. The God who sent Jesus to earth to be the solution in that frail human form knows exactly how to disrupt and overcome the evil in the world through a frail human. And he can work in you. And I would just ask, God, give me words of wisdom. Help me to know the right thing to say and the things not to say. Help me to listen for your voice. When you get ready for that party that you're just like, I think I'm going to feel awkward. Ask for God's presence to be with you in it. And then let's take an example and just look at how did God show us how to give more. There's 3 ways. God gave personally, he gave lavishly, and he gave his presence. So let's look at the personally. He came into, verse 10 says, he came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. God didn't send a revelation about himself. He came to live among us, or as Eugene Peterson translates it, he pitched his tent among us. It's this beautiful image of when the tabernacle used to be pitched in the middle of God's people as they were traveling through the wilderness, and that's where the presence of God would be. John 1:10 is actually describing that very same kind of presence in the middle of his people when he comes to live among us. And I like that actually the world didn't recognize him, not because I think it's great that the world didn't recognize him. I just like the hopefulness that when I don't recognize him, it doesn't mean he's not there. I just love that he gives so personally that in our midst right now, Jesus is here. That even if I don't agree with the believers in my life, he's still here. That when I don't understand the family dynamics and situations that are going on, Jesus is still here. He came personally, and he's not leaving just because I don't see him or don't recognize him. I love that he gave lavishly. Verse 3 says, God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. But to all who believed him, skipping down to 12, but to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. How did God give lavishly? How did he give more? Well, let's just start with the basics. He gave everything. All of creation, all of life, all of light, lavishly in spite of his rejection. Right? Think about that in a Christmas context. One of your relatives snubs you really bad, and you're like, oh yeah? You're getting a lump of coal. The response of Jesus is, I will give you my very best, even when you kill me. He gave the right to become his children. And finally, God gave his presence. Verse 16 through 18, from his abundance, we have all received one gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart, and he has revealed God to us. How did he give his presence? Well, by giving us blessing, by showing us not just what the law says, but what the meaning of the law is, by revealing the Father to us and modeling it in front of us so that we could all understand what exactly the Father wanted from his creation. That he would describe it for us, and in his giving, I love that he didn't just give his presence for those 33 years with Jesus, but that he also gave his presence through the sending of the Holy Spirit. And I love thinking about Christmas and thinking about Revelation all at the same time. And I love the fact that God doesn't give his presence now, but he will give his presence for all eternity. And now when we're with him, we won't even need the sun, but the glory of God will light up the New Jerusalem. What a beautiful thing. This is how God gives. He gives lavishly. He gives personally. He gives his very presence. And now all of us who have become apprentices of Jesus, all of us who follow him, who are his disciples, we get to tell the story of Christmas with our lives as well at this time. And so we should ask ourselves, wait a second, how can my gift giving tell the story of Christmas this year? How can I give more in that same way? And I would say it's exactly the same way that Jesus showed us, by giving personally, by giving lavishly, and by giving with presence. And so I'm just going to give a couple ideas. Let me just say this. Don't go out and just scrap all of your normal gift giving from hearing this. That's a really bad idea. But maybe pick one or two things and just take the journey with me and take a step into how can I actually tell the story by giving more this year? Just one person. How can I do that? Here's some ideas. I heard this story about a dad and his daughter who was a senior in high school. That's very close to my heart since my daughter will be graduating here pretty soon. And what he did was he knew it was going to be her freshman year coming up in college, and she was going to be away from home. And so he gave her a journal, and he got a journal as well. He bought 2 journals, and they were matching. And what they decided to do was this. For that first semester, they would each write their experiences in that journal and communicate to each other. And then when she came home for break, they would exchange journals together and be able to understand each other's journey and heart and stay connected in that way. One son knew that his dad liked coffee, and so he went and he found just a really incredible coffee that he was excited about. He bought the coffee and mugs and those kind of things, and he gave them as a gift to his dad, but with a note that actually explained that this coffee was only to be actually taken when they were together. It wasn't just a gift of coffee for his dad, but it was actually a gift of relationship, that they would share this experience together. For this year, so my daughter Charlotte is 10, and we were talking about what she wanted for Christmas, and she was saying that she wanted a Nintendo Switch Lite, and we were talking about that, and it was interesting. We were having a conversation, we were talking it through, and I was asking her why she wanted that, and what was, what was she kind of dreaming about, and she actually, I think kids get this quicker than adults, honestly, and she just kind of had this little epiphany where she said, you know what, honestly, Dad, I think it would be cool, but the truth is I'd probably play with it for a little while, and then I'd probably put it in the corner. And then I don't know if I would play with it that much, honestly. I don't even know actually if I really, really want it. And I was like, that's incredibly insightful. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. And so we started talking about, well, what is it that would actually bring you a lot of joy? And we started talking about how can we do gifts that actually bring relationship and don't disconnect us? And so what Charlotte and I decided is our gift to each other, and she doesn't have any money, so I'm just paying for both of them, right? Our gift together is we're going to go snowboarding one day at Alyeska. That's our gift together. And so we'll be able to spend that relationship time together as a father and a daughter. You can do things like, we've done this in the past, and actually this is a fantastic way. Write a handwritten personal letter that talks about all the things you are so grateful for in the life of the person you could give it to. Can I just say this? And I know I'm picking on the gift card thing. You understand what I'm saying? If you hand me a $25 gift card, I will be grateful for that. But at some point, I will forget it. If you hand me a 2-page written note that talks about all the things that you love about our relationship, do you think that thing gets tossed in the trash? No. That thing will live on the bottom of my sock drawer forever. Or wherever you keep your stuff. I keep mine in the bottom of the sock drawer. I have no idea why. That stuff is meaningful. And it brings relationship. Another idea is food just brings people together. Maybe the gift could be I signed us up for a cooking class. And we get to go together. And here's the cool thing. We're going to learn how to make this dish. And then after we learn how to make it, we can take turns cooking it for each other. And it just builds that. A date at a restaurant you both like. We got a bunch of creative people in here. Art that actually reflects the relationship and love and purpose of that relationship. I think when we do these things, and in that way, when we give more, what we're not necessarily saying is you have to spend more. What we are saying is I think we would worship better if we actually took the time at Christmas to say, man, God, what we're actually celebrating is the gift of relationship with you. And I want to tell that story in my own life by giving the gift of relationship to the people I love as well. And if we're just intentional with even a few people, I think you're going to have more of those spaces and moments where your heart can be connected with Christ and where you can be at peace and at rest and worship and in love with our Creator who has given us relationship. And I know that gift giving is such an important part of Christmas, and so I think it's just important for us to take a look at it, clarify it a little bit, and take a step back and say, is this bringing me closer to loving my neighbor, or is it making me more distant? I think when we draw closer to God and closer to each other, we'll definitely be telling the story of Christmas a little bit better. Y'all hear that okay? One other way that we can give more is next week. The message is entitled Love All, and we are taking up a special offering. I'd love you to we've asked you from the beginning of this. Part of this is specifically decide to buy one less gift than you'd plan to. And in that space, take the money that you didn't use for that gift and bring it. We're going to collect and put our resources together, and we're going to give an offering to Beacon Hill, which does lots and lots of great work around our city, both in helping kids who are in foster care connect with their biological parents. It helps foster and adoptive parents in all sorts of ways. It helps kids find their forever adoptive homes. It does a whole host of things that are actually a real blessing to our city and to our state. And so we're going to be able to give our offering to Beacon Hill next week. And so I hope that you will, with joy, join me in being able to give more that way. Why don't we stand? May the Lord bless you and keep you, and cause his face to shine on you. May he lift up his countenance to you, be good to you. May he cause your hearts to be filled with worship, and may he give you the desire and the ability to give like he gives. Go in peace and serve the Lord with joy. God bless you. Our service is dismissed.